Hey guys, this is Zio, and today we'll be looking at farming. This is my makeshift farm that I've built on our test world, and it's already prepared so that we can start placing our crops once we get everything set up. And we're going to start with how to hoe the ground, because a lot of people have been having trouble with that. And for that you need a hoe, which I already have. And you need to do it in lanes. Basically, this is a lane right here. You cannot do it in two lanes right next to each other like this, because when you do that, it will mess it up. So you will start right here on this square like that, and we have now hoed a single piece of grass. And then we need to move back one step and do it again to this one, and then again to that one. Now if I were to go over here and go sideways like so, you can see that I just destroyed what I did right there, because it's always hoeing in a straight line ahead of you like this. So now we could just start like that and continue going like this. But if I try to go back here and do that one, once again, it destroys what we already did. So what you need to remember is to always hoe in a straight line while walking backwards or forwards. So we can fix that by just doing this. And now we have our line again right here. And we're going to take it all the way to our walkway. Now, you always need to skip one, because if you do this one, once again, you're destroying this square right here. So you move 2 over, 1, 2, and then start doing the same thing. Like so. Whoop, fell through the wall there. Like so. Now we have 2 rows. Then again, we move 1, and then hoe the next one. And we keep doing that until we have the amount that we need to plant. So for now, I'm just going to stick with one side of our farm right here. I think that'll be enough for what we're trying to accomplish here. And we have 5 rows, each one 5 long, which will yield 25 plantable squares or blocks. Now, onto seeds. Okay, so now I have in my inventory all sorts of things you can find in the world that are plantable. Well, not yet, except for the coffee beans. What we need to do is we need to make seeds out of all these things. And to do that, we do this. We take the blueberries, place them here, and as you can see, blueberry seeds are crafted right from the blueberries. Now we can plant them. But before that, let's do the same thing with the rest of our things. So goldenrod is the same way. You just place it in the middle and it gets you seeds. And each goldenrod gives you 4 seeds, unlike the blueberries, which only give you 1. Cotton also gives you 4. And the cotton can be planted anywhere. They don't actually need to be planted on the farmed land. They can be planted on just regular grass. The potato is also 4 each. However, the potato does need to be put on farmed land, unlike the cotton seeds. The ear of corn is also 4. And corn does not need to be planted on the farmland. It can be planted anywhere and it will grow. And the coffee beans are just directly planted without having to turn them into seeds, which obviously, as you can tell, does not yield as much of plantable crops as the other things do. So to plant, we basically walk up to our farmed land right here when it's already hoed, and we simply place it down just like that. And we do the same thing with each of the blocks. Now we have planted a row of coffee. Now, I'm just going to keep going on this farmed land already, with all our seeds, just to make it look nice. So I'm going to put a blueberry in each one of these, and a goldenrod in each one of these, and a cotton in each one of these, and a potato in each one of these. And the corn we'll put right here. So now we've planted all 25 of our farmed slots. And it takes a while for these to grow, and there's several stages to them growing. Once they do grow all the way, you can start to harvest. So let's time-lapse a little bit, and I'll be right back. Alright, so our crops have grown, and it's time to harvest them. So let's go down to our farm. And as you can see, I chose to replant all this corn right here because I accidentally destroyed this one. So, let's start with the corn. The corn is picked up in 2 stages. On the first one, you pick up 3, and on the second one, you pick up 2. Now, you don't want to start with the 2 because watch what happens. You only end up getting 2 corn out of that. The top 3 are destroyed. So you always start with the top, pick up the 3, and then you can pick up the 2. And that's how you can harvest all the corn. And then of course you can replant it. The coffee gives you 2 coffee beans each, which means that you basically double your coffee when you plant it and harvest it, because you take 1 coffee bean to plant, and then you get 2 back. With blueberries, you get 4 blueberries. So you plant essentially 1 blueberry because you get 1 seed out of 1 blueberry, and then you pick up 4, so you get 4 times as much as you start off with. The goldenrod flower is the same way. Since 1 goldenrod goes into 4 seeds, and you get 1 for each goldenrod that you plant, you get a 4-to-1 ratio. Likewise with cotton, you get 1 cotton each time you pick 1 up. Now the potato is more efficient. You get 2 potatoes for each one that you harvest. And since out of 1 potato you get 4 seeds, that means it's an 8-to-1 ratio. So potatoes are the easiest to grow, with the exception of corn. The corn gives you 5 for each one that you plant, and then of course you get 4 seeds from 1 corn, which means that you get 20 from 1. It's the most efficient one to plant, and the second one most efficient is the potato, followed by blueberries, goldenrod, and the cotton, while the coffee beans are the least efficient, and those can take quite a while to multiply. So now let's check out what we can do with these things that we harvested. Okay, so now that we know how to farm, let's see what we can actually do with the things that we farmed. Let's go down our ladder over here into our cooking area, where I've prepared a whole bunch of campfires with all sorts of recipes that you can cook in this game. So let's start with the charred meat. And obviously you have to actually hunt down the animals that give you this meat. You can't farm any of that. And the first and easiest thing to cook is the charred meat, whichever meat you use, charred rabbit, charred pork, or charred venison. And you cook it using a stick. So let's put a lump of coal in here. And while that's cooking, let's do the same thing to the venison and the pork. And now while that's cooking, let's see what we got, and let's compare. So the rabbit gives you 2 health, 20 fullness, but -5 hydration. The same thing with the charred venison, and the charred pork is 15. So the pork is not as good if you char it as the venison or the rabbit. So now let's go over here and let's do the same thing with the grilled pork, which you get the same way except you use a cooking grill instead of a stick. So let's do the pork, the venison, and the rabbit. Okay? And let's do the same thing with these foodstuffs. Let's compare them against each other. Okay, so the grilled rabbit gives you 220, just like the charred rabbit, but it only gives you -2 hydration. The grilled venison is the same way, 220, and then -2 hydration. And the grilled pork is the same as the charred pork, except -2 hydration. So essentially the only difference is you get less dehydrated by cooking it with a grill instead of a stick. Now let's try boiling the same meats. So let's cook the rabbit, the pork, and the venison. And if you'll notice, the time to cook all these things gets progressively higher the better quality you cook. So let's grab our rabbit. Let's grab our pork. And let's grab our venison. Okay. So, as you can see, it's exactly the same, except with no debuff to your hydration at all. So essentially, you are using 1 water for 5 hydration, which is probably not the most efficient unless you have a whole lot of water prepared ahead of time and you know that you will be needing to use it in the field and you don't want to grab a whole bunch of liquids with you. So it really doesn't matter all that much. Okay, so now let's move on to the other things we can cook. Okay, so eggs. You can just boil an egg. Of course you could just eat it raw, but that would not be a good idea because it gives you a -8 stamina and -2 to hydration plus food poisoning, which is really the worst part. You do not want food poisoning. So let's cook this boiled egg. It is really fast to cook. It only takes 5 seconds, but it does take a water, and it doesn't give you all that much. It only gives you 8 fullness, which is not much at all compared to, say, venison or even pork. It's half of what pork gives you, and almost 1/3 of what the venison gives you. Now, if you take the same egg and you pair it with another egg and some raw pork, you're looking at bacon and eggs, which is a much better foodstuff. Now, the eggs do not have a smell at all, but the meats do. And actually, I did forget to mention that the smell gets worse and worse as the quality gets lower. So the smell on a boiled meat is only 1 for the range and 1 for strength in your bag. If it's in your belt, it's 5 and 2. And these are all, of course, in meters. And if you can see here, the grilled rabbit is 5 and 2 as opposed to 1 and 1 for in your bag. And then 10 and 3 if it's charred. So that is another aspect of the quality of the food. Not only do you get more dehydrated with worse food, you also get a more strong smell. So the zombies are more likely to come after you if you have a bunch of charred rabbit on you than if you boil it. Now the egg has no smell, and the same goes for the bacon and eggs. However, the bacon and eggs give you 30 fullness and 3 health, which is really, really good. As you can see, it's better than any of these meats alone, and double of what the pork gives you. So the bacon and eggs are one of the best things to cook and take with you, because not only are you stealthy because the zombies cannot smell it, you also get a little bit of health that is more than you get from just meat, and you get a lot of fullness, double of what you'd get if you boiled your pork. So now let's see what we can do if we pair these things with some of our homegrown food that we got on our farm. The simplest thing to cook is a vegetable stew. Now the vegetable stew does not take any meat at all, but it does take a potato, an ear of corn, and water. But if you pair that with a meat, you get venison stew. Same ingredients plus venison gives you venison stew. So let's cook that. You can also cook a rabbit into a stew, the same way you do with venison. However, you cannot do the same to pork. Pork will not go into a stew, at least currently as of Alpha 10.4. So let's grab our stew. And as you can see, the vegetable stew gives us 5 health, which is more than any of the meats alone, and more than the bacon and eggs. It also gives us 20 fullness, which is on par with venison. However, it gives us a whole bunch of hydration, which is just like if you had some water. So now let's compare it to the venison stew. The venison stew gives you a lot more fullness. It gives you double the fullness that the vegetable stew gives you. And it also gives you the same hydration and health that the vegetable stew gives you. The rabbit stew is somewhere in between. It does not give you as much hydration as the vegetable or the venison stew, but it does give you more fullness than the vegetable stew by 5. It gives you 25 as opposed to 20, which is less than the venison stew. It also gives you 3 health, which is less than the venison stew, but identical to the bacon and eggs. Every single one of these stews, however, does have a smell. As you can see, it's 20 and 4 if it's in your bag. And it is identical for all the stews. So you don't really want to grab the stew if you're going to go into the hub city. That would be a bad idea. Every zombie in the vicinity is going to come after you, especially if you're holding it in your belt, as then the range grows to 60. So any zombie within 60 meters is probably going to come after you if you have a stew on you, even if you're stealthy. And that's probably not the best idea if you're in the hub city. So now let's take a look at what we can do with water. So the simplest way to cook water using a cooking pot is just putting a single bottle of murky water in here and putting some fuel in and then setting that to cook. Now if you already have your water bottled, then you can put it in with a goldenrod flour, stick some fuel in, and cook it. Now there's one more way to get water if you're in a bad spot, especially at the beginning. If you grab your can of whatever food you find and eat it, or just find an empty can, you'll have an empty can. You can take this and fill it up with water by walking to a water source, grabbing a bit of water, yes, and going over here. And let's see, let me grab a stick real quick. Put the stick in here. And then we take our can of murky water, put it in here, light the fire, and cook it. So now let's grab our water, our goldenrod tea, and let's start to compare. The bottled water gives you 20 hydration, which is actually less than the vegetable stew. So my bad on that one. it is only 20, but it does give you 20 stamina, unlike the vegetable stew, which gives you none. Same thing about all the other stews. They do not give you any stamina at all. The goldenrod tea is twice as effective as the bottled water. It gives you 40. So you really want to cook your water into goldenrod tea if at all possible. Also, it must be mentioned that the goldenrod tea removes negative effects like diarrhea. So if you drink a whole bunch of unboiled water, murky water, and you get diarrhea, which is a 50% chance every time you drink some murky water, either directly from the water source. And let me do that real quick. Oh, I can't drink out of here, so never mind. But if you get diarrhea, then you can easily get rid of it by just drinking your goldenrod tea, which is a very good thing because you can usually grab some goldenrod tea with you and walk next to a lake if you are thirsty and drink from the lake a couple times and take a chance that you might get diarrhea. If you don't get diarrhea, well, great. You're now, hydrated. You don't need any more water and you still have your goldenrod tea. Perfect. Now, if you do get your diarrhea, oh, not too bad. You can still get rid of it with your goldenrod tea and you have no issue. So now let's compare the boiled water, which is basically identical to the bottled water. Except, of course, it does not stack. Now, it does stack in the campfire. You could cook 8 of these, and they would go all in here. However, you can only grab one at a time, and each one will take 1 slot in your backpack. So you do not really want to use this method if you are capable of getting some bottled water. It is much superior to just grabbing cans. Now, let's take a look at what else we can do. Now, with our corn, we can cook it into corn on the cob from an ear of corn, which only gives you 2 fullness. So let's cook it, and this should be fairly quick. And you can also bake a potato with the cooking grill. So let's do that. And let's take a look at our corn. And the corn gives us 2 stamina, 2 hydration, and 4 fullness, which is just a little bit better than the ear on the cob. Ear of corn, sorry. And it's not really efficient if you don't have a lot of water. However, if you have so much water that you don't know what to do with, which really isn't that hard to get considering you can make jars and then just walk next to a water source and cook it, you can just cook a bunch of corn on the cob and use that to eat. And it does restore stamina and it does restore a bit of hydration. So it's a pretty good food. It just does not do much. But it does have a smell, a little bit. Not strong smell, 1 and 1 if it's in your bag, but a little bit nonetheless. Now, if we grab our potato, our baked potato, you can see that it restores 12 fullness. That's better than the corn on the cob. And since you get 2 potatoes from each one you plant, that's 24 fullness from each planted potato. And that's pretty efficient. And also, if you notice, the baked potato does not have a smell, just like the bacon and eggs. So you can carry it with you into battle and not worry about zombies coming after you because you have some baked potato on you. They're not interested. Now, we can also cook other things. For example, if you get more involved, you can cook a blueberry pie. Now, blueberry pie takes a bottled water, blueberries, cornmeal, and egg. So, let's cook that down. And while this is cooking, let's take a look at coffee. So coffee takes water and coffee beans. And let's cook it. Oh, I guess I already had that prepared. Biofuel. Let's cover that in a little bit. Grain alcohol, also in a little bit. Tallow, also in a little bit. Okay, so our blueberry pie is done. And it gives you 20 fullness. Now, that's not all that great if you think about it. 20 fullness is exactly what the boiled rabbit gives you, but it has no health. It's also what the boiled venison gives you, or the vegetable stew. Now, the good thing about the blueberry pie is that the zombies are not interested. They will not come after you at all because of the smell, because it does not have any range. So the only benefit of cooking the pie is that it gives you decent fullness while not being any trouble for getting zombies after you. So now let's take a look at our coffee. And the coffee gives you -1 hydration, but it also gives you a caffeine buzz. And that's great because it lets you sprint pretty much indefinitely. It is one of my favorite actually things to farm and cook because it makes combat a lot easier if you're using melee, because you do not run out of stamina as easily and you can do a lot more zombie killing before they mob you. And since I like to play with running zombies, your stamina is almost as important as your health when fighting. Because if you run out of stamina, they're going to catch up to you and eat you. Okay, so now let's take a look at the 3 things we passed over earlier, which is biofuel. And let's get started on that because it will take a little bit. Grain alcohol. That's also going to take a while. And tallow, which should not take a while. Now, biofuel is used for gasoline. You use it with grain alcohol, craft it down into a gas can, and you can use it to fuel a chainsaw or an auger. And of course, as we know, you can use gas to put together into a oil barrel and then blow it up and kill a whole bunch of zombies with it. So it is a pretty useful thing. Now, grain alcohol also has one other useful use that you can use it for, and that is to make health kits. A bandage plus grain alcohol plus blood will give you a first aid kit, and I will cover that later on. If you're wondering what that noise was, that would be a zombie blowing up because he went into one of my traps upstairs. I will not reveal what the trap is yet because I plan to cover that later on in a different video. So while this is cooking, let's take a look at one other thing. I believe there it is. And this also uses a beaker, just like the biofuel and grain alcohol. And it is an extremely important recipe because if you get infected, this is what you will need to take in order to get rid of the infection. Not to mention that the antibiotics also give you wellness. So let's wait for this to cook down and I'll be right back. Okay, so there's one other thing that I forgot, and it's right in here, and that would be cornbread. So it takes a cornmeal and a bottled water, and let's cook it. And the cornbread is not one of the best foods, but it is fairly cheap because the cornmeal is very easy to get. It's like a corn, I think 2 corn placed together. Let's search for that. That's 2 corn, one on top of one another. So it's fairly cheap. It only takes water and corn, but it only gives you 10 fullness. However, it has no cost to your smell. So there will be no zombies coming after you if you carry it with you into the hub city. So let's take these 4 foods and put them right here. The boiled egg, fullness 8. Cornbread, fullness 10. Blueberry pie, fullness 20. And bacon and eggs, fullness 30. Those are the foods that have no smell. Oh, also the baked potato, which would go somewhere in here, in between the cornbread and the blueberry pie with 12 fullness. Now, let's take a look at the things we're cooking over here. The biofuel. The grain alcohol, which you can actually drink. Let's try that. And indeed, it makes you very dehydrated, but it does give you a beer buzz, which is kind of interesting because it's really not a beer buzz, it's more like a Everclear buzz, but you know. So the beer buzz is great because it gives you 2 stamina every 1 second. And then if we stack that with our coffee, which gives you also 2 every second, that's 4 stamina every second. And I don't know how long the beer buzz lasts, but it is quite a bit longer than the 2 minutes of the caffeine buzz. I think it's closer to about 5 minutes. So with this, you can literally run around for a very long time and probably even swing heavy things like a sledgehammer without depleting your stamina too much. So I'm gonna drink some of this goldenrod tea to get my stamina back up, or my hydration back up. And the last item that we're going to be covering today is the antibiotics. So the antibiotics remove infection, dysentery, and advanced dysentery. It also makes you immune for, I believe, 24 hours. And let's test that. And it also gives you wellness. You are immune to further infection. And that lasts for 1 game day, which is 24 game hours. And I believe it also gives you about 5 wellness over time, generally. So it is a very useful thing to cook if you can find the moldy bread and the potassium nitrate that it takes. So that will be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please hit the like button. And if you really enjoyed it, please subscribe. And I hope to see you again in one of my future videos. If I did miss one of these recipes, then by all means, please tell me. And I will include it in one of my new videos to make sure that everything is covered. So I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys in one of my next videos. Take care.